The 2023 Concacaf Gold Cup second match day has come and gone, and what a tournament we are having. Some teams that were not on many people's radars to make the quarterfinals are in very good positions to make them, and some teams that people thought were potential semi-final contenders are looking like they might crash out in the group stage. So after an exciting second match day, here's how every group is currently looking. In Group A, we had two unsurprising results in match day 2. Both Jamaica and the US handily beat weaker opponents, Jamaica beating Trinidad and Tobago 4-1 and the US beating St. Kitts and Nevis 6-0. Now these two results puts Trinidad and Tobago in a tough spot where they need a win against the United States to keep their quarterfinal dreams alive on the last match day. And currently in the group, the US is ahead of Jamaica on goal difference. However, going into the last match day, Jamaica has an easier matchup against St. Kitts and Nevis than the US does against Trinidad and Tobago. So that group is still completely up in the air for who could end up in first place. St. Kitts and Nevis, unfortunately, by losing this match day, is eliminated from quarterfinal contention in their first ever Gold Cup after just 2 match days, but for them, making this tournament was the big win. The US and Jamaica, though, is what everyone's looking at as like Trinidad and Tobago. Yes, mathematically they're still in it, but the odds of things going Trinidad and Tobago's way in the last match day are just so small. It looks like it's a race between the US and Jamaica for first in the group, and it is a goals race. And so on the last match day, expect 2 goal-filled games as both the US and Jamaica try to fill the net against weaker opposition to get them the goal differential required to take first place in the group. In Group B, we have Qatar and Honduras drawing 1-1 in what for Honduras is a result that keeps them just barely in it, and for Qatar is a completely disastrous result. The other result in this group beating Mexico, beating Haiti 3-1, which makes Mexico the first team to clinch a quarterfinal spot, but this puts Haiti on 3 points and both Qatar and Honduras on 1 point going to the last match day, where Qatar is playing Mexico and Honduras and Haiti face off. So this puts Qatar in a situation where they have to beat Mexico to move on to the quarterfinals, and that is just not going to happen. There is almost no chance that Qatar gets a win against Mexico in the last day of the group, especially considering that Mexico losing would opening up a chance for Haiti to take first place in the group, so Mexico's not going to go super easy against Qatar in this match. Honduras versus Haiti is what the exciting match in this group is going to be on the last match day. As for Haiti, any result would likely give them a surprise quarterfinals appearance, whereas Honduras needs a win against Haiti to move on. Over to Group C, we have Panama beating Martinique 2-1 in a result that clinches a quarterfinal appearance for Panama. Panama continues to be playing very well in this Gold Cup. Big result against Martinique, which makes them the second team to get into the quarterfinals, one of just 2 teams who have clinched a quarterfinal spot after 2 match days along with Mexico. The other match in this game was El Salvador and Costa Rica playing to a 0-0 draw. Now this is a result which for El Salvador, it keeps them in the quarterfinal fight, as now they need a win against Panama, which isn't likely, but for El Salvador, at least not losing to Costa Rica means that they're not 100% eliminated just yet. Costa Rica, after losing to Panama in the first game, draw El Salvador now, which means they need to beat Martinique on the last match day. If Costa Rica beats Martinique on the last match day and El Salvador doesn't beat Panama, then Costa Rica will barely have gotten the job done, but they will get the job done if that occurs. However, any other result against Martinique will result in Martinique going through, which means that Martinique, a draw and then a favorable result for them in the Panama-El Salvador game means Martinique could potentially have a surprise quarterfinal appearance and make the quarterfinals of the Gold Cup for the first time since 2002. Martinique have put themselves in a very good position to do this. It's going to be a very hard-fought game for them against Costa Rica, but they are in a position where as long as they do not lose to Costa Rica, there is a very high possibility that they end up in the quarterfinals. And the last group, Group D, this group has become the most interesting one in the Gold Cup. Guadeloupe beats Cuba 4-1 in a result that moves Guadeloupe up to first place in the group, and formally eliminates Cuba from this Gold Cup. And Guatemala and Canada play out to a 0-0 draw in what is a second disappointing result for Canada in this group. Now this puts both Guatemala and Guadeloupe tied for first with 4 points in the group. However, Guadeloupe is ahead on goal difference, Canada is in third with 2 points, and Cuba, of course, is eliminated. The last match day, we have Guadeloupe versus Guatemala and Canada versus Cuba. Now, in terms of mathematically what can happen in the last match day, this one is the most up in the air. If Guadeloupe gets a draw or win against Guatemala, they are into the quarterfinals of the Gold Cup for the first time since 2009. Now, that would be a massive result for Guadeloupe, and given the results against Canada and Cuba, they could very much possibly draw or win against Guatemala. Canada has to beat Cuba, or else Canada will crash out of this tournament in the group stage in one of the most disappointing results in Gold Cup history should that occur. Now, where things get interesting is if Canada beats Cuba and Guadeloupe and Guatemala draw. If Canada beats Cuba by more than 1 goal, then if Guadeloupe and Guatemala draw, Canada moves on ahead of Guatemala and Guatemala is eliminated. If Canada only beats Cuba by 1 goal, as things stand right now, Canada would have 2 more goals than Guatemala and would move on. But if the Guatemala-Guadeloupe game goes into a high-scoring 2-2, 3-3 draw, then things start to get really interesting. Canada needs to run up the score line to be able to move on, even if they only beat Cuba by 1 goal. So a lot of things could potentially happen in the last match day of this group. Rule of thumb for Canada is beat Cuba by more than 1 goal, and then regardless of what happens with Guadeloupe, Guatemala, you are fine. But for Canada, this is an incredibly disastrous position for them to be in. To draw first Guadeloupe at home and then drawing Guatemala, like those 2 results for Canada are just completely disastrous in a group where they were expected to win all 3 games and easily go into the quarterfinals. Like they were expected to have already clinched a quarterfinal spot at this point. Instead, they're sitting in third, and we're talking about potential goal differential situations for Canada to move on. Just like already, this is the storyline of the Gold Cup, is how poorly Canada has been playing so far. But that's how all the groups stand after the second match day. A lot of very interesting things, as a lot of spots still up for grabs. Only 2 spots in the quarterfinals are confirmed as of yet, and only 2 teams have been completely mathematically eliminated as of yet, which means that of the 16 teams that came into this Gold Cup, 12 of them are still playing for quarterfinal spots going into the third and final match day of the group stage. It should be a crazy last match day, and honestly, anything can happen at this point. So that is for this video. As always, if you'd like to hit like, if you want to see more of my stuff, hit subscribe, follow me on Twitter, link is down below in the description, and I will see you next time.